Hey everyone, welcome to the Business and Beyond podcast. I'm your host, Chris Doyle. Today on episode 25, we have local Cleveland entrepreneur Ethan Holmes for Holmes Made Foods LLC. Ethan, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me here. Proud to talk about my brand, Holmes Mouthwater and Applesauce.
Yeah, man. You gotta, and so like we were saying before, a little bit before the podcast. So we had a couple of people in the food and drink industry, beverage industry. Like we had Marissa Sergi, Evan and her husband Evan, as well as Zach Buckeye, Buckeye Brownies as well. So third part of the edition.
Exactly. I'm very proud to be here, and my product, we've been on the market since 2015. So it's just great to be able to fulfill the stores in Northeast Ohio.
Absolutely.
And be here. So thank you.
Yes. So Ethan, without going much further from me, so where are you from?
Yep.
And kind of talk about yourself and your company, because you do have a pretty cool background.
Definitely. Thank you so much. Yeah, so I'm from Shaker Heights, grew up there, born and raised, and went to Shaker Heights High School. And while I was a student, I had this idea to start my own food product. And I didn't know what that was going to be. And eventually I said applesauce. It's a weird product. People eat it everywhere. And so I innovated this, spent a year working on the product, eventually bringing it to the market. And so it's really been since 15 to now I'm 28 years old. You know what I mean? So that's kind of the steps. And then eventually we launched in 2015 at Heinen's. That led to Giant Eagle, Whole Foods, and other markets. So,
yeah. And I got to say, the packaging's really cool, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I mean, you brought in some little bit of applesauce. We'll have to try it a little bit later.
And then my grandfather showed me how to make the product originally. I just had this idea to make it, but I didn't know how to actually make applesauce. And so he showed me how to peel it, boil the apples, and then it was like, how can I make this the best recipe ever? And then how can I do something different than what's already out there?
And so when you were younger, was that like a common thing between, did your grandfather, did you go over to his house and he had applesauce made?
So he actually lived with me and my parents in Shaker. He's retired, and he would just make a lot of food from scratch. He was known to be a chef. And so I was like, hey, Grandpa, you're always making things. Can you show me how to make the applesauce, So, and I wasn't even a big culinary person. I didn't even like applesauce. But, again, it was just one of those things that, hey, this could be a gold mine. All I see is Mott's, Musselman's, and all the same sugar-filled applesauce crap. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
And then so you went to college at University of Hiram, right?
Yep. So Hiram College.
College.
Yep. Exactly.
And so is that where you learned a lot of because obviously, you have the product, you're doing well with the product, but with any business, you have to have, the business etiquette, right? The accounting,
right.
And stuff like that. So
that's a great question. Yeah. So I would say I learned everything like actually doing it.
Really?
And Hiram just allowed me to grow up as a person and put me, I think, in the industry, just starting it. I think allowed me to bootstrap for the first time. I was on my own as an adult. I was applying for loans and winning business competitions. But prior to that, I would just seek the knowledge, to answer your question. Work with mentors, advisors, the Small Business Development Center, SBA, Small Business Association, and they would sit with me for an hour, 2 hours and say, hey, Ethan, this is how our business plan works. This is an executive summary. This is a financial statement. And so I learned through that.
Yeah.
But by the time I got to college, I still didn't know anything, let's be honest. So that just allowed me to actually start doing things from just instead of being concept to actually action, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I got into my first kitchen by a junior in college, and we were set up. You know what I mean? So
yeah. And so where are you based out of now?
Where we're based out of now.
Yeah.
We're making all the applesauce in Bedford at a place called Savory. So it's right outside of Cleveland. Historically, we've been renting spaces. Before we were at a place called the Cleveland Food Hub. Right on Carnegie. And so, yeah, we currently rent space.
So, and then talk about your operation today,
yeah,
right?
Definitely.
Just the supply chain, really from the apple orchard to the consumer's mouth.
Definitely,
right?
yeah. So I think right now for the industry as a whole, you're seeing a lot of consumers going out to, buy more groceries, specifically post-COVID. You're seeing a boost in online outlets, online channels, Instacart. And so we're definitely seeing a tick in the industry to go and grow more in retail, and that's what we've been doing. As far as supply chain, we work with a lot of local orchards, Patterson's, Bauman orchards. We haven't had any issues, but we have seen an increase in pricing, and that's from packaging.
Yeah, with everything.
Everything,
yeah.
Packaging, ingredients. And so we bring the fruit in, we wash it, we produce it at our space with automatic equipment, and then from there we're making this applesauce, packaging it, and these distributors, customers are picking it up. And we have distributors like Midland or Tiny Footprint. in tiny footprint. They actually service all the Whole Foods in Ohio, Indiana. So that's our customer for that. You know what I mean? And so that's kind of how the process works right now.
And how did you come up with like just the the pack, because it is, like I said, a kind of a cool packaging. Like when I do see it in Giant Eagle,
Right.
And I was literally like it was like a couple weeks ago, and I saw it in Giant Eagle in Medina, and I was like, dude, I'm about to have that guy on my podcast.
Exactly.
Like there's his product right there. That's
stood
so
out
cool.
to you. That's great.
Yeah.
So, and that's kind of what the idea was behind it. There's a story behind every part of my company. So I'll just tell you this one. I was 16 years old. I had this jar of applesauce, no label on it. And I said, hey, I need branding. I need to create a brand. And so I went on Google and looked up graphic designers. And I found like 5 companies.
Yeah.
And I emailed them. My name is Ethan. I'm 16. I have this applesauce brand. Can you help me? And nobody responded except one guy, and his name was Ron Hansen. And I'll shout him out. Thank you, Ron, from Washington, the state of Washington. And he loved what I was doing. And so he did all of this for free.
Really?
Well, not this, but the initial design, the packaging.
And you haven't changed it.
We've changed it over the years.
Oh,
But
okay.
the birds, the logo you see, that was all made at that time in 2009, 2010. And then eventually, and he invested in me by doing that. You know what I mean?
Do you still talk to him at all? Or?
Yeah, not too much anymore. Just 'cause we kind of moved on. But he was the first one to really believe in me and give me a visual to answer your question.
And then how many? So what are the different kind of flavors that you're selling in stores today?
So we have 3 flavors and 2 package types, which is 6 SKUs total. Yeah. So, and we have original, we have an apple pie cinnamon, and a strawberry peach.
Okay.
And then we do like a 16-ounce glass jar and a pack of cups.
Uh-huh.
The cups were huge post-COVID. Like we sold a lot of cups to the Columbus Zoo last year. So you just think about prepackaged foods, you know what I mean? Applesauce can be anywhere.
Yeah.
So.
And so as a precursor, I know it was a little bit harder to get you onto the podcast because you were just in New York, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
You're just everywhere, man.
Right. Just sales and trying to push the brand,
100%. So you're a hustler.
Yeah.
And so talk about like just your day to day, right? Like what are you doing on a day to day basis when you're not, coming on in podcasts?
I'd say everything's in phases for me right now. My day to day is, partially operations, making sure, again, supply chain is covered, orders are being fulfilled. I think that's probably about a third of my week. And then the other remaining is keeping up with current obligations. And that could be accelerators, fundraising commitments. We raised some capital, which we can talk about. And through that, that's led to investors. And every time you take money from an individual, you're now kind of on the hook to that person. It's almost like you're a boss now. So I have now a few bosses that have given me money, and I now have to report to them almost bi-weekly, weekly. So that's part of my job on top of, just keeping the product moving, growing it, delegating to a few people, contractors. So
yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And so what's that capital allocation like for you when you're trying to get new investors, new bosses, like you say? Is it because, hey, we want to push to a new territory, or hey, maybe you want to try new flavor? Like what's that research like for you?
Definitely. So we've done a mix. We work with like Nielsen and Spins, and they're one of the big data providers in the industry. And we were able to look at the Apple industry and say, okay, this is where we're seeing a lot of the trends and upticks, and regions that are most successful. And what we saw was a pouch was one of the most successful products.
Really?
The squeeze pouch of applesauce.
Oh my gosh,
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So that's what we've recently raised capital to do. We're actually moving away from what you see here to have a more sustainable, profitable company. So we're actually going to move towards outsourcing. So we raised capital to rebrand, get new packaging, and to start outsourcing.
So it's not going to be like this anymore,
Correct.
right?
So we're going to have a company actually making the applesauce for us full time, and my job would just be selling and marketing it. So.
And is that kind of where you see your role transitioning the next 6 to
Correct.
12 months? Really, is more just pushing the brand.
Correct, by the end of this year. And so we're hoping for that launch to be by October right now. And so I'm just putting that out publicly for everyone. Pouches will be out by October.
Big announcement.
Exactly. So we've already put the money down for the brand new website, new e-commerce experience. We're also doing an Amazon launch, new marketplaces, all of that. So we're kind of going out with the old and with the new, to answer your question.
Yeah. And talk about like kind of the influence that, because you're from Shaker, and we were talking a little about mutual friends and everything, the Lowrys, and talk about your influence with just Cleveland itself, and how, and then your upbringing and how that's kind of helped build your brand.
I'd say Cleveland and Clevelanders, it's like one of those places where you don't have a lot of opportunities, but there is still so much opportunity. I know that's confusing, but I feel like anywhere you turn, you can find an outlet or someone who's willing to help you or talk with you. And that's better than other places like a New York or California where they're just too busy or, hey, you're not at my level yet. So Cleveland allowed me to work with some of the best people in the industry, and then some of the people who were getting started, and we were all on the same, playing field, if that makes sense. So hopefully that answers your question a little bit. I know, and maybe I lost part of it because I was like, I had this whole thing I was trying to do, but could you re-ask that question?
Yeah, no, you're fine. Just growing up in the city of Cleveland.
Okay. So yeah, growing up specifically in Shaker, I think it made me a hustler, and it taught me how to talk to people and innovation. I don't know the best way to say that. I don't know the best answer for that.
So, do you think like growing up, I guess in the city, right, of Cleveland, where nothing's handed to you?
And I want to make it clear, I grew up in Shaker.
In Shaker.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, all right.
Some people would say the city of Cleveland.
Yeah. They make it a little confused for sure. Okay, yeah. So Cleveland around surrounding areas, right?
Shaker, right?
So nothing's handed to you, right?
Exactly, correct.
You have to work for everything, and I see that a lot in a lot of people that I do have on the podcast, right? Where we go ahead and talk about, hey, their upbringing, and they're doing very well. A lot of people that I talk to are doing very well, but a lot of them did not come from money.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of them had to, like you said, bootstrap it and just find investors for capital allocation, be able to sales and market themselves, right? So, and I think Cleveland does such a good job of like humbling you.
Exactly,
you know what I mean?
It does humble you a lot. And I think for me, again, growing up in Shaker, there was a lot of resources around me, like the Shaker Launch House, which was huge at that time. That was the first co-working space for entrepreneurs, really in Northeast Ohio, and they allowed me to go there after school with this applesauce dream and just work with entrepreneurs.
Dude, that's awesome.
Yeah, and so I didn't know anything. I didn't have any stores, but the experiences, the exposure, I think, is what was most valuable.
Yeah, they really. And then I have to say that it's weird, but like the city rewards you for like working hard.
It does. I do agree with that. And there's a lot of people who see what you're doing because it is such a small market compared to others.
Yeah.
And they'll give you those opportunities. And for example, we won the Cleveland Chain Reaction in 2017. And we got a $130,000 investment from the Cleveland Foundation because of that. So, that organization's worth $2 billion in assets. And so they said, hey, Ethan, we liked your pitch. We've seen you on the news and you working with young kids. Can we invest in you? So
it's actually funny. So you were on, the first time I heard about you was I saw you on Kicking It with Kenny. On Fox, like I think it was maybe 4 or 5, because I was definitely in college when I saw it.
Okay.
And then our mutual friend Marissa, she was talking to you on LinkedIn, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's the same guy I saw a couple years ago.
Exactly.
So that's when I reached out to you. I was like, man, this guy seems like the kind of guy I want to have on the podcast.
Definitely.
You know what I mean?
Fox is great. So Kicking with Kenny, all of that. So
yeah, 100%. So kind of going back from there now, I've heard a lot of the success stories, and maybe people sometimes look at you and you're like, wow, like Ethan's he's got it, man. He, this stuff must come easy to him. But I talk to a lot of people who are in successful position, and it, from what I hear, it's and for me myself, right? It's not easy. It doesn't come natural, right? It's just a lot of discipline, hard work.
Right.
So kind of talk about that. Like, what were some of the more difficult parts about opening up your now successful business?
That's a great question. I think number one was just figuring out the steps that I needed to take as an entrepreneur to launch this. And I think that's for anybody who's launching a business. You're going to be like, hey, I know what I want to do, but that might not be what you should do to actually successfully, make this happen. So I had to reach out to resources like going to a store like Heinen's or at that time, maybe even Zagara's in Cleveland Heights, and saying, hey, what do I need to do in order to get on the shelf? Studying my competitors, and just, again, putting myself out there. So my biggest advice would be put yourself out there. Stop planning so much. I had a business plan, and I would revise it every day, and I realized, why am I doing this when I could just go out and sell? And so, for example, I walk into a store like Constantino's at that time, say, hey, I want to bring this on. They're like, Ethan, applesauce is great, but you have no nutrition facts and you have no barcode. So do that. And then I would find resources to do that. I found a company that did barcodes for $20. And those barcodes were not the GS1 government barcodes that you need, but they allowed me to get barcodes to get into small stores, you know? So every time I did something, I only got further and learned more, if that makes sense.
It's kind of like just the analysis by paralysis, you know what I mean? And I think a lot of people I feel like
It's true.
there's a lot of people who, I feel like that you're lying to yourself if you don't want to be your own boss.
That's true.
Right? I feel like a lot of people want control of their life. They want to be able to write their own paychecks.
Right.
But they're maybe, they are in paralysis because of the analysis, or maybe they just don't want to take the jump, which is sad in some sense. Maybe some people just lack the faith or whatever the reason.
Anything, yeah.
Yeah. But obviously you've done a really good job of just putting yourself out there, marketing yourself, selling yourself, being able to constantly do that. Is that selling part that you do? Because I'm in sales, right? I'm a sales guy, right? I'm a mortgage loan officer. I have to go ahead and whether it's business to business or business to consumer, but you're always selling yourself.
Always selling, right.
But for me, when I first started in my industry, right, it was very difficult to understand sales.
Right.
Like I didn't want to have to go for the ask. I didn't want to have to overcome objections. And I felt very, I guess, timid even making phone calls or meeting people face to face, right? But for me, it was a lot of reading, a lot of mentorship, a lot of just, again, putting yourself out there.
So I would say for me, it was always just putting yourself out there. I remember being a college student. I had no money, I had nothing. My room looked like a jail cell, I'd say. Shout out to Hiram.
Yeah.
And I actually had a piece of printer paper, and I wrote down all the news stations within Northeast Ohio. And I'd call them just like you were saying, and I'd sell myself. My name's Ethan. I'm 21 years old, and I make applesauce. I'd love to come out. And 2 or 3 of them, hey, we're busy, whatever. One says, hey, will you come out to the news and do an interview? I do the same thing for the plain dealer. Then the next day, I'm calling all the grocery stores. And eventually I catch the buyer for Heinen's, and he's like, drop off some applesauce to Warrensville Heights. I'll check it out. And I don't hear anything for 3 months. And then eventually he calls me while I'm at college and says, I want to put you in, I think it was 23 stores, 3,000
Oh my
units,
gosh.
And at that point I'm like, I'm dropping out. I made it, but I didn't, but you know what I mean, at that time. But again, it was just, every time I just did something, I felt like I got something from it. And if I didn't get something from it, there was 2 other things I had behind it that were going to lead, you know what I mean? So my advice is like, and then what you talked about sales, like we built this whole brand off of demonstrations. We would go to grocery stores every week, 3-4 times a week, doing demos and promoting it, to the point that I had 3-4 pages of scripts of different pitches. And I learned through that, to answer your question.
Yeah.
Once you learn how to sell it to a consumer, you then can sell it to anyone. You know what I mean?
How were those first? Like, talk about your first time you went to a store.
Yeah.
And had to demonstrate.
That's a great question. I think the story changed, the pitch. Obviously the pitch was at first obviously evolved, but it was at first just a very simple. This is what I do. Very local, and then it kind of became more of a movement, I think is the best way to say it. Holmes mouthwatering is A, B, and C, and this is why you should buy it. And we had everything down to a science, to the point that consumer, when they're eating it, we would start talking about what's in it, just so that they were thinking about that. And then once they had made that decision and they started picking it up, I'd have in parentheses, start to push 2 or 3, because at this point you now got them thinking about the sale. So every little thing I did allowed me to learn how I could improve my pitch even more.
Yeah.
You got it.
That's so interesting.
Yeah,
Did you so you pretty much, like you said, every step further, you kind of learned a little bit more.
Correct.
So as you did more of the demonstrations, your script changed. Maybe you got more concise in certain things.
Certain stores were better than others. You know what I mean? And just certain hours were better than, other times to sell the product. You know what I mean? So we just learned how to create a better system. And then what was unique about us that most people have never done is we only employed high school students for like 3-4 years, and we would bring them in through organizations in Cleveland, just like any student. Hey, I want to work within a company on the weekends, and they would get like a few $100s a month just to go into a Whole Foods and just pitch, the applesauce. And because they're kids, I remember I came in once to check out the store. They had sold 50 jars in like 2 hours.
Really?
And there was and I'm looking at the checkout line, and there's like all these people with 6 to 8 jars. They're like, hey, I love that girl. She has so much energy, and I just wanted to support her. After that, I put out a sign that said, "Hi, I'm a high school student. I'm here to represent Holmes. Will you buy from me?" And then sales went up even higher.
Really? And you're still doing that?
We're not doing that anymore after COVID.
Oh, yeah.
So post-COVID, demos died down. So now we're actually just doing workshops, which I can speak about a little bit.
Okay, yeah, talk about workshops.
So we work with an organization called Young Entrepreneur Institute out of University School, great school, private school. And so that organization actually oversees all of the youth entrepreneurship pretty much throughout Northeast Ohio in general. And so they hire us and other, youth speakers to come out to schools and do workshops, essentially. And so we're doing at least like 6 this month and next month. Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, kind of a way to give back too.
Because that's what it's all about. I bring in applesauce cups. I have a PowerPoint. It's about 2 hours, hour and a half, and they're learning stuff. Eating applesauce. Yeah.
And so you mentioned a little bit about, COVID, right?
Exactly.
And you've been in the business for a while, right? I just remember, what was it? It was March. It was like March 15th of 2020 when shit hit the fan, right? Really and I remember I took out like $600 or $500 and gave it to my girlfriend at the time to go get a bunch of groceries because we all thought the world was empty. Right, exactly. But I was going to these grocery stores, man. I'm like, oh my gosh, we gotta stock up. So now, obviously everything's pretty good, like mellowing out now. Definitely. But in that time frame, I thought we were shutting down here, right? I thought we were done. Of course. Talk about your experience with that, when you were obviously trying to get everything rolling, moving one step further. I mean, how was that effect for you?
I would say, that COVID quarantine pandemic experience was different for everybody in every business. But for me, it was like, I'd say a good time for us to work on our brand, focus on our direct-to-consumer channels. We saw a 150% increase on our online D2C channel just, during COVID. We had people all over the United States, California, New York, Oregon, Washington, etc. Hey, I saw you online. I want to buy it. And that was just something new that, created a whole new line of revenue, revenue for our business.
So it didn't have that. Did it have a significant impact?
It didn't have a significant impact, to answer your question. And then for me, it allowed me to focus more on the business too during time. So like I wasn't out as much. I was doing Zooms, and so I actually raised all that capital during that time.
Oh man.
So I was pitching. I did probably like 6 virtual pitches to investors just during that COVID quarantine time. You know what I mean? So,
yeah.
Which was good because usually real life would have pulled me in other directions that I wouldn't have had that time. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And so talk about like, I know we touched a little bit upon it. Where do you see your brand going in the next 5 years?
Great question. Right now, again, we're moving towards that outsource model. We're actually outsourcing to a manufacturer in Chile. So we're going to be flying out there in July.
You're going to Chile?
Yeah, going to Chile. Never been, there. So that should be crazy. And they're going to be doing our products. And
why did you pick Chile?
We went through like 5 manufacturers to remake our applesauce, and everybody wanted to make this crappy, thin baby food consistency, and we wanted something that was the best. And so they happened to be the one that could do it at a good price point. And this company represents a lot of major brands. So they were like, hey, we want to work with someone like you. You're not super big, but you're trying to get big, and we'll help you get there. And so next 5 years, I see us with more products, pouches, plastic jars, more cups, and then innovations. Applesauce is a sleepy category. And so when I mean sleepy category, I mean there's no innovation white space. It's been the same for 20, 30 years. And the biggest innovation was the pouch, if you think about it. And that was a company called Go-Go Squeeze.
Yeah.
And now it's just flat. And even with the pouch, everybody has it now. And the Go-Go Squeeze kind of tastes like crap. I mean, it's not a good product. And they know that. They're just, hey, we do the pouch, and that's what we do well. But what you want to be able to do is say, how can we bring this to the next level like they've done with yogurt or ice cream? You got Halo Top. You got all these guys that have come out. Applesauce, nobody has done that. And that's where we're going to be in 5 years. We're going to be the Ben and Jerry's of applesauce and more.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So. Yeah, you're right. I mean, I guess it's so other than just flavoring, right? There's really not much. I mean, the product's the product, right? I mean, you've perfected the recipe itself, right? So, I mean, maybe obviously you're changing things progressively every other couple of years and everything. But again, it's how innovative can we really get?
Well, the thing is a big thing, and I'll just speak on this for the listeners who don't know much about applesauce. You have probiotics you can add to it now, omega-3s. You can do avocado, all these different
avocado.
Yeah, so whatever you want to applesauce you can do, but the big ones are again adding vitamins, probiotics, omega-3s. That's really new because that's that holistic approach specifically post-COVID. What we want to do is actually create a home style line, and that's our focus. Is just leaning into home style quality.
Yeah, it is weird. Like, I mean, I know I kind of joke about avocados, right? But like, I feel the millennials who you're gonna have your avocado toast, right, with a cup of coffee, and that's been like the trendy meal and everything.
Exactly. Yep.
And I think it still is pretty trendy, right? Is that something that you kind of foresee Holmes doing? Like, oh, hey, instead of the avocado toast, maybe have a cup of applesauce.
So you can definitely see from us in the next 3 to 5 years or less more innovations from us as far as like acai, avocado, and other holistic superfruits. We really want to be like neutral. We're not just kid focused. So I sent you a preview of the new brand. We've actually spent like $100,000 just on packaging, creation, development, brand art. And with that, we're moving away from being a kid-focused applesauce.
For everybody.
Yeah. We want to be like Chobani. That's another good example.
Yes.
About Chobani, you can give that to your 2-year-old, if I have a 2-year-old, or you could give it to your grandmother who's 80. And you know what I mean? So that's what we're trying to move into with our design.
And that's kind of like how... when Marissa and Evan were on a couple of weeks ago and they were talking, they're wine focused, but they really wanted to encompass a lot of different consumers, not just, a sit down at a winery. We wanted to be able to have it, at, your kid's graduation or have it at a sports event and many different encompassing things. And they're the ones that are really taking their beverage industry to the next level because a lot of those people aren't innovating like that.
It's very true. And I think a lot of it, what they're doing to speak on them is they've created multiple brands, and that's how they're accomplishing that. For me, I'm trying to reach multiple demographics through a single brand. And then from there, create extensions, other product lines, to your point. So
100%.
Yeah, definitely. So we want to have Holmes as obviously the bread and butter, but we do want to expand into other products to answer your question. It's not just applesauce.
100%, man.
Yeah.
So just as we kind of wrap up here, Ethan, I have two questions really. The first one is, and maybe you've already talked about it a little bit, but just reiterate it. It's just really for the good takeaway. What's some good business advice you give for people who are looking to get into starting their own company?
Yeah, great question. What I would say is that number one, you want to always be branding yourself. And I think everybody has something that's special about them or a story. And I think you want to figure out what is your story and try to encompass that again into a brand, into a personality. And if that's going to be a product or a service, then you want to get that across through the packaging, whatever you're selling to that end user. And then again, establishing what do I need to do, 5 steps. It doesn't have to be 100 in order to get to the next level. And for me, in the beginning, it was recipe. Then it was packaging. Then it was pricing. And every time I did stuff, I learned more. For example, a lot of people can say, well, I'm not going to start selling until I do 3 months of financial spreadsheets and understand my pricing. But you really don't know pricing until you start making it. And then you actually will see, oh, this is how much I'm actually paying for. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I love that. Like, when you sell your product, you want people to know, like, oh, Ethan, he got the recipe from his grandfather, and then he was able to, start his own business. That I think that's just so good. Build your brand. Make sure people know what you do and who you are. Exactly. And then the last question, man, is really just, just general life advice.
Yeah. Definitely. I'd say just some life advice is never stop growing, always look for new opportunities, and closed mouths don't get fed. You know what I mean? And then I guess the last one, Wayne Gretzky said this, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Love it, brother. So, love it.
Perfect. But thank you so much for having me, Chris.
Yes.
Love what you guys are doing, and I'd love to come back and donate applesauce. So thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Bring a couple buckets next time.
Definitely have some cups, give them out to the guests. So
yeah.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Hey, everyone, that was episode 25 of the Business and Beyond podcast with Ethan Holmes from Holmes Made Foods LLC.
Definitely.
And you're in. I'm sorry. You're in.
Yeah, I was gonna say that. Yeah, so you can actually find the product at Heinen's, Whole Foods, Giant Eagle, Mark's, Dave's, as well as several independents in Ohio area.
Yeah.
So perfect.
You'll be everywhere soon.
Yeah, definitely. And then you can find us on our website. And then with the new products, we're going to be able to actually launch in places like Target. We're talking to Sprouts. You know, we've actually pitched to Walmart last year for their open call event. And so they tried to put us in 350 stores with this product. And I told them no. You know what I mean? So I know that's maybe for another interview, but I
Next
said
time.
we're not ready for that. You know what I mean? So you got it.
Alrighty.
Awesome.
Thank you, Ethan.
Appreciate it.